What's up, guys? So today I'm making a video on what are the best dirt bikes to buy for part outs and that actually sell well. We don't want a bunch of parts that just sit on the shelf. You want a bunch of parts that you buy it, part it out, they sell, and they're gone. So I was gonna make this video like a top 5, like these are my top 5 favorites to buy, but it's kind of tough to do considering some of these machines, you pick it up, if it's rough and you pick up a 96 YZ125 for 200 bucks and it's in rough shape versus 300 or 4.5 for a pretty clean but broken, past the point of repair CRF 450R. So it's hard to say which one's better than the other. So I'm just gonna make this video based purely on what actually sells. So some of my favorites to part out are about 1996 and up two strokes. Those always sell well. That 03 that I just parted out a few videos back, that machine has sold extremely well, especially to what I thought it would sell. The 96 to 01 YZ125s, there's still a lot of people riding them, so the parts just fly off the shelves. The power valves, the cylinders, even as a core, crankcases, transmissions, you name it, all of those make for a pretty good part out. Some of the steel frames, they're not the best, so you can still part out one of the 92 to 95 YZ125s, and those do still sell well. The 92 to 95s, those still sell well. The parts aren't quite as valuable as like the 96 to 01s. When you get into the older ones, the 80s models, those do still part out. The parts do still sell. I will buy one if the price is right. It's just anything that's got drum brakes, there's a lot less people riding it. Less people riding it means less demand in parts. So what you don't want to do is go out and spend big bucks on a 1989 CR250. If you're spending $1,000 on that, that's going to be tough to turn a profit. Where if you were able to pick one up for $300-400 bucks, you can make some money. Because the cylinders are getting harder to find, crankcases harder to find, carb, all of that. Those parts, it gets real critical that you have the good quality like air box and stuff like that, because those air boxes on the older machines, they're obsolete, but there's just not very many people riding them, so it takes longer to sell. So pre-pandemic though, I bought a lot more dirt bikes than I do now. There was 03 KX250s. I bought a couple of those. Man, those did great. I think I bought 2 of them as a bike in a box. I mean, it's stripped down like these are right here and already in pieces. And I parted those out. I think I picked them up for like $300 for one of them and $400 for the other. I made a killing off of those bikes because if I remember right, it's like 03, 04, 02, 03 are specific. You have to buy that year model part. And I'm thinking it was just all 03. Like the swing arm is 03 only, so it's only $250. So it's like 250 bucks. Where some bikes, the swing arms aren't worth anything. The trail bikes, some of the XR series, the CRFs, if you could get them cheap enough, they do well. The CRF 150Rs, those are one, if you can get them cheap, they part out very well. They're just a little sought after. It's a little bit harder to find. I have yet to do one of the CRF 150Rs. I've done a few of the 150Fs. Tricky things like the kids' dirt bikes. Some of these, they're hit and miss. What you don't want to do is go out and buy one of these that is all decked out in Chinese parts, because then you have an issue. You can't sell those Chinese parts for much of anything. But if you pick one of these up and it's got an OEM carb on it, still has OEM wheels. This is a TTR. They make next to nothing aftermarket for these. but you want to make sure you get those OEM parts. So like if you go buy a CRF 50, those ones I don't like to part out just because there's so much Chinese parts on the market. Other things to look for are the harder to find bikes. The harder they are to find doesn't necessarily mean the parts won't sell. So we'll do, for example, the TTR 250s. They're not very common. You don't see very many of them. And I mean actual 250s, not the 230s, not the 225s, which those do have their place and they do sell well if you can get them cheap enough. But the TTR 250, there's like no sold listings on eBay for half of the bike because you list it and the stuff just gone. Flies right off the shelf. You don't have to sit on it for very long because it's just gone. Like the XT 225s, I think they called them a Sero. I don't know how you pronounce it, SEROW. Those ones, they were pretty good. Every one of them I've ever parted out did pretty good. I've never done a part out on something like a big wheel. I've looked at comparable parts, but all the ones I've ever bought, I had a buyer for them as they were. So just to boil it all down, the 2-strokes really are some of the best to part out. Newer 4-strokes do part out well too. You just want to make sure that you're buying stuff that has sold listings. If you've got lots and lots of sold listings, you're golden. You can sell it'll all just fly right off the shelf instead of sitting on a bunch of inventory. So when you see all the inventory that I have here, a lot of that has to do with either it was a bad call buying it, or B, we part out 3 or 4 machines a week and the parts kind of pile up on the shelf. I think we're at 3,650 in listings now, 3,650 listings. So some parts don't sell, especially if they make a lot of Chinese stuff. It's harder to sell it. If you look up there, most of the fuel tanks I have for dirt bikes are Suzuki's. Suzuki made a good tank. Yamaha's blue tanks are not very good tanks. They do bring much more money. KTM's made pretty good tanks too. Mostly ATV tanks is what I have, but these Suzuki tanks, they just don't sell well. So that RM125 one will sell, it's still a new listing. The Yamaha blue tanks, you want to make sure if you go buy one, any kind of Yamaha, I guess that TTR tank, you look for cracks right here on these lines and then right around this up here. That's where they're most commonly cracking. So that's a very 96-01 YZ125s, a nice clean OEM tank. It'll bring 200 bucks. These KTM tanks, they're built so well, they don't really break. And I guess Suzuki and Kawasaki did the same. This is Brian's bike, but I bought a few of these over the years, and something like this, buying this blown up, if you could find something like this blown up for 500 bucks, these do part out well. The fuel tanks sell not because they break, but because people strip them. These cylinder heads on something like this, 400 or 500 bucks. Same thing with the CRFs. This is a 09. They're a little less sought after because it's not fuel injected, but there are still people riding them. You know, these 4-strokes have those FCR carburetors, and them FCR carburetors are 150 bucks and up, even in poor shape. These exhausts, subframes, some subframes, it depends on the model if it's worthwhile or not. A lot of time these newer model forks have some value. And then the wheels, I mean, when you tear it all the way down, there's quite a bit of components there to go off of. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and if you have a question, feel free to reach out in the comment section down below. Let me know what you're parting out this week. Are you parting out some dirt bikes?